The Chicago White Sox and the Philadelphia Phillies were postponed on Monday due to weather. There will be a straight doubleheader on Tuesday featuring Lynn and Lucas Giolito. The Phillies and White Sox have the exact same record after 16 games, and both teams are struggling with pitching. The White Sox have the exact same record as last season after 16 games, which causes, understandably, a lot of frustration at the harsh reality.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. Today's episode is brought to you by HelloFresh. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Go to HelloFresh.com/MLB60 and use code MLB60 for 60% off plus free shipping. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morawski, a lifelong diehard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. After 16 games of the 2023 season, our Chicago White Sox are 6-10, 4 games back as of this recording in the AL Central. Monday, Sox were canceled due to the weather, and if you're in the Chicagoland area, you probably could have predicted it if you were following the weather. And if you had tickets for Monday's game, or were even maybe thinking about going to Southside Mondays. Boy, that was would have been a nasty, very cold. It was like on and off flurrying and snow and wind, and not odd for April, but after having the string of nice days that we had, unbelievable the type of weather change. But again, it's Chicago, so no surprise that it was canceled. A straight doubleheader on Tuesday. Lynn and Lucas Giolito scheduled to pitch. Need these starters to go at least 6, maybe 7. Lucas Giolito has talked about how that is definitely a goal for starters to do their job, get through 6 so they don't offload a ton on the bullpen. And boy, just thinking about what has been going on with our bullpen, and we got a doubleheader on Tuesday and then a day game on Wednesday. Need these starters to eat some innings. So again, after 16 games, our White Sox are 6-10. Well, let's take a look at last year, 2022, one of the most disappointing seasons in White Sox history. Well, after 16 games last year, Sox were 6-10, but only 2.5 back in the AL Central. If it feels like the same problems exist with the White Sox, it's because they do. And very little, if anything, was done to fix things this past offseason, seemingly by choice by the front office. You got that log jam of a DH, first base. How do we fit these bats in without watering down the defense? Members of the core just can't seem to stay healthy. Not enough depth pitching wise, that's for sure. This is what general manager Rick Hahn said this past offseason. There's reason to believe in this group, and we weren't going to simply make changes for the sake of making changes. It's betting on the talent that's in there. The manager and the coaching staff put in the best position to succeed, and hopeful that some of the alterations we made will improve our luck from a health standpoint. Luck, hope, not necessarily things, that you could be confident with to sustain some success, especially if you want to maximize this so-called championship window that we're still in. Kind of feels like lipstick on a pig. A lot of the things that Rick Hahn has said off season after off season, pretty much the same, but phrased in different ways. You think about that definition of insanity, or whoever's contributed to that, whether it's Einstein or whomever, of doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Speaking of different, Hahn also said before the season started, this year seems different to me. This year seems different just from the level of energy, the level of focus, and the commitment. Just eager to get going, to show that last year was an aberration, that we wasn't who we are, and we're going to get back on track to the team we saw in 2020 and 2021 and regain our place among the teams that are contending for championships. In 2020, that was that COVID shortened season. The White Sox were 8-8 after 16 games. In 2021, after 16 games, the Sox were 8-8. So not a huge difference from the 6-10 start. But if you're thinking back to last year and you're thinking, maybe a different manager, a different coaching staff, yes, they didn't throw a lot of money at all to fix different issues like second base and add real outfield depth. I don't know, maybe with a different manager, a different message, they can try to get off on a better foot. And it just hasn't felt like it. The same record, the same health issues. I'm shocked at the bullpen. I don't know why. It's not like we invested a ton and we lost Crochet and Hendricks, but the inability to just come in and throw strikes, I'm just speechless. I bought into the concept, as maybe you did too, that despite seriously addressing particular needs, a new manager and coaching staff should get the Sox off to a better start. And I've been apologizing to Sox fans left and right. If I sold things to you and got you to believe in this team, and now you are just beyond frustrated, I really thought things were going to get off to a better start, at least fundamentally. And, Grifol has talked about, he doesn't like the term early, and that you can't, of course, win a championship in the spring, but you can lose one if you're not prepared. And it just seems like the Sox are not prepared. From the results that you see on the field and the mental mistakes, and sure, not backing up bases or not covering bases, but maybe a game plan, like a strategy, some sort of scouting report that hasn't gotten to players in the appropriate amount of time, with whatever arm they're going to be looking at in the batter's box, on and on. Some recent questions that have been floating around recently. I mean, we can just take Sunday, for example. Why did Dylan Cease throw 113 pitches, a career high? According to a recent athletic article by James Fegan, Cease's 113 pitches Sunday were reflective of Grifol's need to get 6 innings out of him after 6 relievers were used in Saturday's 10-inning grind. And I think there's also just a lack of faith in the Sox bullpen. No surprise there. It's been extremely inconsistent and at times extremely bad. So even though that was pushing it for Dylan Cease, maybe there's more confidence in him having 100+ pitches on his arm than going to the Sox bullpen after what the coaching staff saw on Friday and Saturday. Another question, again, why is Gavin Sheets still playing the outfield? And this is what Grifol had to say about that recently. I have complete confidence in him playing the outfield. I've seen that happen over and over again in the major leagues. Of course, he's talking about the spin collapse in Minnesota. it's just one play. It doesn't define who he is as a defensive player, and it doesn't necessarily define what he brings to us as a player in general. To be honest with you, I think he wears more of it because there were some guys out of position last year and the team wore it, right? And the organization wore it. And maybe that's what's a part of it. I don't know. I don't know what people think. I know what we evaluate and what we see in the work we see being done. All right. Well, Gavin Sheets was one of those players that was playing out of position. Again, he is not an outfielder, but because of the lack of effort, I guess, that the front office has had and forcing this issue, this is where we're at. And really, what is Pedro Grifol going to say? He's not going to throw his boss under the bus and say, these clowns in the front office that hired me failed to put a quality roster together with competitive depth, so I'm going to spin things for you here. I mean, that's essentially what he is doing. Rick Hahn is Pedro Grifol, I should say, is Rick Hahn's hire. I mean, Grifol is not going to throw him under the bus. So he's going to spin it to the media. He is going to basically say what the front office has been saying. It's like, this is the guy, we basically need his bat, and we're going to try to stomach his defense somehow, some way. The Chicago White Sox and the Philadelphia Phillies are pretty comparable. The latest power ratings from The Athletic confirms that belief. More on that in a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by So Rare. Our new sponsor, So Rare, is a revolutionary fantasy baseball game and marketplace transforming fans into owners with officially licensed digital cards featuring players from across all 30 MLB teams. Unlike other fantasy baseball platforms, So Rare managers truly own their fantasy experience, collecting, buying, selling, and competing with player cards against global opponents to win epic rewards. Win or lose, you still own your cards, and there's no cost to play. Plus, the more you win, the more you advance, collecting increasingly powerful cards and accessing next-level competitions and rewards. MLB game weeks happen twice weekly and span a 3 to 4 day cycle. The end of the game weeks, MLB managers who rank at or near the top of their leaderboards win a variety of rewards, which can include So Rare cards, game tickets, merchandise, signed jerseys, and VIP experiences like meeting MLB stars. Prizes may vary depending on the competition. Head to sorare.com/lockedon. That's spelled SORARE.com to draft your team of free player cards, set your lineup, and start competing today to win epic rewards. Again, that's sorare.com/lockedon to start playing today. Just recently, The Athletic put out its latest power rankings, and the Chicago White Sox, no surprise, dropped a little bit. They were at tied for 20th in all of baseball, and The Athletic has them now at 22 with a 6-10 record. This is what the write-up was. An unfun week for the Chicago White Sox included them losing 2 of 3 to the Orioles in Chicago and 2 of 3 to the Twins in Minnesota. But if that was the sum of their frustration, then maybe we could flick it away. But in the week before, the Sox sang the same sad tune, losing 2 of 3 to the Giants and Pirates. In fact, they still haven't won a series this season. The Sox are stuck. We know we have something to prove, and we haven't proven it yet, GM Rick Hahn said. Well, the Sox have allowed the second most runs in the majors this season, outdone only by the lonely A's. So they're on their way to providing something, that's for sure. We've got to clean it up, Dylan Cease said on Sunday, and that is true. Yes, a lot of cleanup needs to be done. That was a theme. A lot of players kind of saying that. We'll get into that in a little bit. White Sox opponents for the next 3 games, the Philadelphia Phillies, they come at 19th. Now, they were previously ranked at 13th, so they dropped 6 spots. Again, the Phillies coming in at 6-10 like the White Sox, and this is the write-up on the Philadelphia Phillies. See if you can just kind of find some similarities with our Southsiders. There's a thin line between playing with urgency and freaking out. This is among a manager's primary duties to make the roller coaster ride of a season feel more like a penny pony ride. So after another week in the red, as the Phillies went 3-4 combined against the Marlins and Reds to drop to 6-10, it is worth peering under the hood. It's a good sign that Rob Thompson hasn't made any drastic changes. Why should he? Winning a pennant buys a lot of leeway. The Phillies rightfully have the confidence to not wig out with a losing record after 3 weeks, but urgency is helpful. And that's exactly the message Bryce Harper sent when news broke last week that he's readying himself for first base as a way to quickly return to the field. That's urgency, not panic. I think there's a lot of Sox fans in panic mode. I might even put myself in that category. We definitely talk about urgency in April and May with the way this schedule is shaping up. And we knew the schedule. We've known the schedule for a long, long time. And with the Sox 4 games under 500, kind of slipping away in the AL Central, and you look ahead to what the Sox have, especially after this Phillies series, it does not get any easier at all. The Phillies 6-10, according to MLB stats, Phillies have the second ranked offense in all of baseball. They're slashing 293, 348, 464. That 293 team average is best in all of baseball. They do not hit a ton of home runs, and they don't walk a bunch, which does sound familiar. Pitching wise, though, Phillies pitching is ranked just above the White Sox with a team ERA of 5.48. The White Sox were a top offensive team for a while, but have fell to 13th in all of baseball, slashing 261, 316, 418. Pitching wise, our Chicago White Sox have a team ERA of 5.72. 81 walks issued is second to only Oakland with 86. When it comes to bullpens, both Phillies and Sox are very bad. Chicago ranks dead last in all of baseball with a 7.57 bullpen ERA. Philadelphia is 29th in all of baseball. Their bullpen has a 6.83 ERA. So both managers are preaching the same message during this series. Get into their bullpen. Sox bullpen has given up the most hits, 46, and the third most walks. Phillies bullpen has issued 41 walks, 2 more than the White Sox. So you got Lance Lynn in the first game. I think that's a 3:10 start on Tuesday. And Lucas Giolito follows in the second game. Good pitching can beat good hitting. You know, Phillies have a powerful offense right now, better than what Baltimore had. So you cannot give the Phillies more free passes. They will make you pay. I liked Lucas Giolito's last start against the Twins. That was the Gavin Sheets collapse in right field game, I believe. Last year at home, Lucas Giolito had a record of 5-7 with an ERA of 6.08 and 84 strikeouts in 14 appearances. Hopefully Lance Lynn gets it together too. He's been giving up a lot of home runs, and his, I believe it was his last home start, which maybe his only home start this year against the Giants. That was a rough go of things. Supposed to be a pretty nice day on the south side, lots of sun, high 50s, very different than what we saw on Monday. Sox need to limit those walks. They absolutely have to stop giving up home runs, maybe start hitting some home runs, not just the first inning. Rick Hahn does not seem to be worried about the subpar start, and players as well as the coaching staff try to put a positive spin on what we have all witnessed so far. More on that in a moment. So, along with questions like why is Gavin Sheets still in the outfield and why did Dylan Cease throw so many pitches, a continuing question that I feel like bounces around Sox fans, and I've even got this from other Locked On hosts throughout the league, is how does our general manager, Rick Hahn, still have a job with what he has had to show for in terms of results? And I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I just feel like it depends on what Jerry Reinsdorf wants to get out of this team. And if Jerry Reinsdorf doesn't really care if there's a lot of success, if he's just trying to make some money and he's not really worried about winning any more championships right now, and he gives Hahn whatever budget it is, and if Reinsdorf doesn't expect much, well then like Hahn doesn't have to do an outstanding job, okay, because he's just doing the bidding of his boss. So that's really where it comes down to. I'd like to know what Reinsdorf's true expectations are, because I have a feeling they're not for the White Sox to be competing for a World Series year after year after year. There was couple interesting articles, one in the Tribune, one in the Sun-Times, which some Hahn blurbs that you just have to be talked about. This was from Paul Sullivan in the Chicago Tribune this past weekend, and this was a quote from Rick Hahn. Just regard the unrest amongst Sox fans with this 6-10 start. And Hahn said, "You guys," I guess meaning the media, "always hear from the most negative fans. The fans I talk to never come up to me and say, 'Rick, this is the start of just the same stuff as last year.' They seem to seek you guys out in the comments section. Imagine that." Sullivan went on to wrote, "It should be noted that this is Hahn's 11th season as Sox general manager. The team has had a winning season twice, including the 60-game shortened season in 2020. Imagine that." Well done by Sullivan there. And then Steve Greenberg in the Chicago Sun-Times, he had an op-ed piece, and this is what he had to say. "I admit I'm being slightly more reactionary than that, but it's only because the sky is falling with regards to the start to this White Sox season. And it seems that most Sox fans these days have a very difficult time remaining positive about their team, though Hahn might disagree with that." And yeah, I want to know who really are these people that Rick Hahn is talking about. I mean, folks that just want to be on his good side, slapping him on the back. "You're doing great, Rick. Keep it up." They don't know what they're talking about. I mean, sometimes I'm wondering if Hahn actually watches these games all the way through, actually watches these games, or just gets briefed on them or something, because there's no way you could be watching these games, truly watching and investing your time, and say the things that he is saying. Again, unless the expectations on you by Jerry Reinsdorf are extremely, extremely low. Trying to stay positive here. Players and coaches are trying to do that. This is Jake Berger recently. "We know our time is coming. We know we have the talent in here and all the confidence in the world with each guy, and also the coaching staff. Dylan Cease, there's still a lot of season left. We've just got to clean it up a little bit." I would agree with Cease. Yes, there is a lot of season left, but I got to disagree. It's not just a little bit. There is a lot that needs to be cleaned up. Starting pitching, bullpen, offensive production, defense, fundamentals, on and on. But again, if the clubhouse is tight and the morale is good, maybe that's a thing. I don't know. Maybe they can weather this, but I don't think they could just manage to weather it just by morale and positivity. They have to start getting some results soon before they start fading away in spring. And Griffol's statement of, you can't win a championship, but you can lose one, might come to fruition. This was Griffol on Sunday's loss to the Orioles. "I don't know if we expanded the strike zone or not, but we had a good game plan going in and got some pitches up in the zone in the first inning, did some damage. And after that, we did not make adjustments. Rodriguez changed his approach a little bit, but from my end, he made adjustments and we didn't." I think that is actually a really good analysis. That's some self-reflection there. And it is about in-game adjustments. I had hope that this coaching staff was going to better prepare these players going into games, having a better idea of what they were going to be facing with regards to opposition on the mound, and you got to make adjustments. That's the name of the game. The pitchers are making adjustments to you. You need to make adjustments back. And I think Grifol calling that out is important. Now, what are you going to do with it? Grifol with more analysis. We've got to minimize base runners. They had a lot of traffic the last 3 games, but we also had leads in 3 games. So I'm not going to sit here and say we're close. That's not what this is about. We have got to make adjustments and minimize base runners and walks, a hit with runners in scoring position, and all of the above to help us win games. But it's not like it's a lack of effort. These guys are working pregame. It's one of those runs. We're going to put it together at some point on both ends of the ball. I do want to believe him there that they're going to put it together eventually, but it might just be too little too late. That's my big worry. Now, if you're reading that and you read between the lines and he says, well, this is just one of those runs, he's assuming like, well, we're just getting all this bad baseball out of the way right now. We've just got a lot of bad luck right now. It's going to start turning the corner for us eventually. That's the hope, right? That's the big hope. Are we going down a path, though, that things just can't be changed with all the injuries? And are we asking of players things that they just can't do? With regards to pitching, Yasmani Grandal, who I think has actually been a bright spot, maybe still can't throw out a runner, which is difficult. The success rate for stolen bases is up, but what he's been able to provide offensively and some of the durability right now, I have been impressed with that. This is what Yaz has said. Obviously, we need to do a better job staying in the strike zone, attacking guys. The good thing is it's happening now and not later in the year. We are going to address that early instead of late. So continue working on it. We'll start looking at numbers. We'll start looking at what it is, whether it's delivery, whatever that may be. You got to do it now. I mean, you cannot wait. You need to figure out, what is happening with these guys coming in out of the bullpen, especially, and they can't throw a strike. Is it they're trying to be too cute? They know where the heat maps are, and they don't want to, throw into a hitter's wheelhouse, so to speak. So they're maybe nipping on corners a little bit more than they should, and then it's 2-0. And they're pitching from behind. That has happened a lot. Is there a lack of trust in the defense? Are these guys just trying to strike it out, do it on their own? Here's Kurt Hassler. It's a challenge coming out of spring training, but I think all teams are in the same boat. It's all being monitored. It's all being watched. There will be a stretch where our starters are going to go out there for 7, 8, or 9 innings for 5, 6, 7 days in a row. And then we're going to talk about the other side of the coin when you've got to keep your workload built up to pitch a lot. Again, another testament, whether it's Hassler, I've heard from Ethan Katz, there's been a lot. Look, we're just in a bad stretch right now. We're going to turn things around. That seems to be, after everything I read, and I read a lot, especially on Monday with no game. You read these different articles from different sources and you kind of put it all together. And what they're saying is, trust us, that this is all going to be turned around. But we've seen this movie before as White Sox fans. And I don't know. I don't know if it's going to get turned around. It didn't last year. Sometimes players just, in my opinion, they just can't do what's expected of them. And yelling, just throw strikes seems like an obvious solution, but for whatever reason, I don't know, starting pitching, bullpen pitching, they've lost the ability. It's been a very bad stretch. And again, everything I've read from Katz, Hassler, Grifol points to the fact that the way things have been going, especially with regards, to pitching, should not define the 2023 White Sox. They are all seemingly pointing to an eventual bounce back, or maybe it's just their hope. Again, it's early, but it's really not. Folks, really appreciate you making time for this podcast, making it a daily tradition. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere you find your podcast. We are on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Hey, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And thanks so much for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. Hey, everydayers, you know who you are. There's so many of you, and I appreciate that. On the next episode, I will recap the White Sox doubleheader. Maybe the Sox can sweep, which will mean they finally won 2 in a row and will have guaranteed a series win. How about that? One can hope. Appreciate you making time for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Morawski. Until next time, go Sox.